The silence that follows a lifetime of being overlooked is not an absence of sound. It is a vacuum of expectation, a space so profoundly empty that it holds an immense, latent power, ready to rush in and restructure the world. This is the truth that settled over Elara that morning, standing on the balcony, watching the Atlanta skyline shimmer like a promise. For years, her life had been a masterclass in quiet competence, a study in what happens when exceptional ability is constantly eclipsed. To eclipse means to obscure or diminish the importance or fame of someone or something. Often used to describe a brighter object blocking a less bright one by the louder, less substantial presence of another. The applause that had swallowed her brother's self-serving announcement had not been a celebratory noise. It had been the charnel house, an archaic or literary term for a building or vault where corpses or bones are piled. Here used metaphorically to mean a place where dreams or true achievements were buried, where her own achievements were meant to rest, forgotten. To understand Elara's journey is to travel back to the fundamental injustice of her childhood, a historical pattern as old as primogeniture, the preferential treatment of the firstborn. A principle that echoes from ancient Roman inheritance laws to the narratives of biblical patriarchs. In Elara's modern Florida home, this principle was not codified by law but enforced by unspoken consensus, a widespread agreement among a group of people, even if it hasn't been formally discussed. Her parents, products of a generation that often confused loudness with leadership, had unwittingly created an environment where her brother's mediocrity was celebrated as dynamic ambition, while her own measured focus was dismissed as mere low-maintenance convenience. This early, consistent invalidation became a subtle, powerful teacher. It taught Elara the crucial difference between the ephemeral, lasting for a very short time, praise of the crowd, and the enduring structure of a well-executed plan. She became fluent in the language of quiet observation, a student of the family's flaws, noting the precise moments when the narrative was hijacked and when the money was, quite literally, being siphoned away. This deep philosophical lesson, that true power resides not in recognition but in execution, was solidified by her grandmother. That single weekend visit, the steady gaze over the two folders, the simple, factual statement, paper outlives promises, was the foundational moment of Elara's liberation. It was a perfect, concise distillation of universal wisdom. Sentimental vows are easily broken, but documented, notarized truth is an unassailable, unable to be attacked, questioned, or defeated fortress. By making Elara the successor, the grandmother wasn't just transferring property, she was endorsing competence and teaching a crucial lesson in advanced English learning. The difference between to promise, a hopeful but non-binding verbal commitment, and to covenant, a solemn, formal, binding agreement, often recorded legally. Elara understood that the greatest act of love her grandmother showed was not a hug or a word of praise, but the provision of a mechanism of truth, a legal document designed to triumph over the family's inherent dysfunction. The very act of signing, of swearing to keep it quiet, transformed Elara from the overlooked younger sibling into the silent architect of the family's financial future, an irony lost entirely on those who considered her merely an afterthought. How often do we confuse loud recognition with true, enduring accomplishment, and what quiet, strategic steps are we neglecting because they lack immediate applause? The 2 years Elara spent in Atlanta, away from the suffocating pressure of her family's solipsistic, the quality of being extremely self-centered or believing that only oneself exists, drama, were not merely a break, but a period of rigorous self-construction. This era of her life embodied the philosophical teaching of the Stoics, specifically the concept of prohairesis, the inner faculty of choice, the single thing that is truly within one's power. While her family continued to believe they controlled her, dictating her role as the responsible, independent, low-maintenance one, Elara was quietly exercising her prohairesis by building an undeniable life. Her full scholarship and career success were not accidents. They were the consequence of focused, unacknowledged labor, a stark contrast to her brother's dependency on handed-down titles and inherited access. The act of receiving the documents from her grandmother served as a catalyst, transforming her analytical skills, honed by years of detailed, meticulous work, into a personal, deeply motivating mission. The confrontation that followed the funeral, where her father presented the waiver, was a perfect dramatic foil for Elara's internal preparation. The family's arrogance, their absolute certainty that she would simply acquiesce, to accept something reluctantly but without protest, was the final, critical error in their assessment of her character. Their use of language was telling. They disguised an attempt at total seizure as a request for simplicity and peace. Her mother's tight smile, her brother's impatient grow up, were the verbal equivalent of a broken, entitled script. When Elara slid the paper back and simply walked out, she was performing an act of pure, distilled power. She didn't need to argue, because the argument was already won, sealed, and notarized. She was engaging in what modern military strategists call ODA loop theory: observe, orient, decide, act. Her family was still in the observe phase, reacting to the immediate situation, while Elara had already completed her loop 2 years prior with the signing of the trust. Her return drive to Atlanta was not a retreat, but a tactical regrouping, a strategic term for reorganizing forces or plans after a phase of action. The meticulous, organized work she performed the next morning, laying out the deeds, collating the ledgers, formatting the spreadsheet, was the practical application of her philosophical teaching. The documents were the facts, her organization of them was the rhetoric. She was not preparing for a shouting match. She was preparing for a legal presentation, using the cool, objective language of finance and law to render their emotional demands null and void, an idiom meaning without legal force or effect. The printing, labeling, and filing were ritualistic acts of self-affirmation, turning the abstract idea of her grandmother's trust into a physical, undeniable reality. The historical relevance here lies in the power of literacy and documentation. From the Magna Carta to the U.S. Constitution, the power of a legally recorded, signed document has consistently trumped, to supersede, excel, or defeat something, often used when a card of a superior suit is played, oral tradition or tyrannical decree. Elara was wielding the same power, the pen as a sword, the paper as a shield. If our deepest convictions are built on solid evidence, why do we so often let louder, unsubstantiated claims make us doubt the truth we hold in our hands? The journey back to Florida with the suitcase full of deeds was the physical manifestation of Elara's inner transformation, a crucial character moment that marked the transition from the silent observer to the sovereign actor, a philosophical term for an individual who is self-governing and independent in their actions and will. Every mile marker was a step away from the shadows of her past and toward the bright, clear light of her own making. The recurring thought of her grandmother's voice, "Paper outlives promises," was not a haunting but a mantra, a word or sound repeated to aid concentration in meditation, or a repeated phrase or saying, a constant reminder that truth, once codified, needs no defense. This concept holds significant modern relevance for English language learners and communicators, the importance of precision in legal and professional English. In casual conversation, a promise might suffice, but in the world of contracts, business, and ownership, only the exactitude of a deed, a trust, or a covenant carries legal weight. Elara's family operated on the fuzzy, emotional language of promises and what makes sense, while Elara operated on the unyielding, not giving way to pressure, inflexible language of law. The climax of the story, the scene in the dining room, is a masterpiece of staged revelation. The carefully set table, the arranged coffee cups, the decorations, and her brother's self-congratulatory speech, all were props in a play he believed he had authored. Elara's entry, her quiet placement of the suitcase, and the soft, steady roll of the wheels across the hardwood were the ultimate examples of understatement as a rhetorical tool, the presentation of something as being smaller, worse, or less important than it actually is, often used for powerful emphasis. She did not need to shout to stop the applause. She simply provided an undeniable counter-narrative. The act of laying the 8 deeds and the trust on the table was a powerful, symbolic moment of truth, echoing historical events where hidden documents, from the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls to the publication of the Pentagon Papers, have irrevocably altered established narratives. Her brother's shock, his cracked voice, was the sound of his illusory, based on illusion, deceptive, reality-shattering. His immediate reaction, what? No. What are you talking about? They were supposed to go to me demonstrated his complete incapacity to deal with factual reality, a profound character flaw rooted in his lifelong entitlement. The family attorney's formal confirmation, delivered in a flat, official tone, was the final, devastating blow, stripping the event of all emotional argument and leaving behind only the cold, hard fact of ownership. The revelation that the quiet one, the forgotten younger brother, was the one who drove the grandmother to the notary, adds a layer of universal wisdom. Those who are overlooked are often the only ones truly seeing the truth. The entire scene was a philosophical teaching on the nature of reality. The truth does not care about your feelings, your expectations, or your narrative. It simply is, and when it is documented, it is incontrovertible, not able to be denied or disputed. Elara's victory was not one of revenge, but one of structural integrity, a perfect convergence of her quiet preparation, her grandmother's foresight, and the rule of law. When we rely on the kindness or promises of others, are we practicing hope, or are we simply neglecting to secure our own foundation with solid, documented proof? The final departure from Florida, before sunrise the next morning, was not a flight but a peaceful coda, a concluding passage of a piece of music, literary work, or event, to a difficult symphony. The empty roads, the colorless sky, and the silence were no longer oppressive but restorative, the calm after the storm, the tranquility of a decisive victory. Elara's feeling of space, clean, unoccupied, finally mine, is a profound emotional development, marking her complete internal separation from the identity her family had assigned her. She no longer carried the weight of their expectations or the pressure to seek their approval. The physical act of placing the fireproof folder on the highest shelf was a ritual completion, an acknowledgement that the battle was over and the structure was secured. This modern life, the hum of traffic, the early risers, the evolving city, was hers to inhabit without a shadow to measure against. The philosophical wisdom Elara now possesses is distilled into a few powerful, concluding thoughts. Boundaries are not loud. They are the quiet doors you close without explanation. Truth does not need to be argued. It simply settles. This is the zenith, the highest point reached by a celestial or other object, here used metaphorically to mean the peak of her realization, of her journey, the recognition that self-worth is an internal metric, independent of external validation. Her family, still searching for the version of me who bent, were trapped in their own cognitive dissonance, a psychological term for the mental stress or discomfort experienced by an individual who holds 2 or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. They could not fathom her silent strength because they fundamentally misunderstood the power of her independence. Elara's story is a powerful lesson for modern living, particularly in the digital age where every feeling is amplified. True self-empowerment often requires strategic reticence, the quality of being reserved or restrained in speaking. The best revenge is a life well lived, and in Elara's case, a life well documented. She learned that a full scholarship to a distant university was more than an accomplishment. It was her severance package, a tool that granted her the physical and mental distance necessary to execute the final, strategic move. The emotional development is not in a moment of triumph over her family, but in the quiet, absolute peace of knowing she no longer needed anything from them. She had moved past the need for vindication, the action of clearing someone of blame or suspicion, into the simple, undeniable state of ownership, of property, and more importantly, of self. Her silence, once a sign of being overlooked, had become the ultimate expression of control. If true strength is defined by what we do when no one is watching, what quiet, undeniable truth are you building into your own foundation that will outlive the promises of other Elara's narrative arc? From the overlooked younger sibling to the legal sovereign of her family's assets, offers profound and universal takeaways for anyone navigating complex family dynamics or simply striving for self-mastery. The enduring relevance of her story lies in its practical demonstration of two powerful concepts: the law of undisturbed preparation and the mastery of negative space in communication. Her law of undisturbed preparation states that significant achievements require a period of sustained, deliberate effort away from the noise of critics and the distraction of shallow praise. Her years in Atlanta were not a loss of time, but a necessary incubation, the process of developing an idea or thought, period where the seeds of the trust could mature into an undeniable reality. This connects directly to English learning. To truly master a complex skill, whether it is a legal structure or a foreign language, one must step away from the pressure of performance and dedicate oneself to the grind, an idiom meaning hard, continuous work of practice and detail. The mastery of negative space refers to Elara's profound use of silence and non-reaction. In her final confrontation, her power lay not in the words she spoke, but in the words she refused to speak, the arguments she refused to engage in. She let the documents, the clean, precise language of the law, speak for themselves. This is a critical lesson in philosophical teaching. Often, the most powerful response to aggression or entitlement is a strategic silence that denies the aggressor the energy of conflict. When her brother shouted, "They were supposed to go to me," her simple, silent presentation of the deeds exposed the gap between his belief and the fact. Elara understood that she was dealing not with a moral issue, but a logistical, relating to the organization and management of a complex operation. 1. Her grandmother, in her wisdom, had bypassed the emotional battlefield entirely and chosen the path of legal certainty. The message to the modern world is clear. In an age of constant self-promotion and performative drama, the most radical act is quiet competence. To build a future that is structurally sound and legally defended is to create a life that is beholden, obligated, indebted to no one's permission. Elara's ultimate freedom came not from inheriting properties, but from inheriting the strength to execute an intricate, 2-year-long plan without seeking a single moment of validation. She didn't seek to change her family's flawed narrative. She simply rendered it obsolete, no longer produced or used, out of date, with a stack of notarized paper. The final, echoing message remains a testament to the power of inner discipline. The only voice that truly matters is the quiet one inside us, and the only evidence that matters is the structure we build when the applause finally fades.